Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And it's time to go into India again because there is no shortage of problems with this vastly centralized society which is attempting to go cashless. Anyway, I'm going to start with this first article because there are several angles to go at this with, because right before this video we're looking at all these headlines. It's like, where do we even start with this? Anyway, I'm going to start with this article out of Reuters that says India announces government bond purchases amid market turmoil. And as the article goes into, India's central bank said it would buy 100 billion rupees, $1.38 billion, of government bonds in an open market operation amid efforts by authorities to reassure investors over a brewing debt crisis in the non-banking financial sector. Concern about a credit crunch in two key NBFCs, infrastructure leasing and financial services, and Dewan Housing Finance, raised fears of wider liquidity problems across the sector and hit domestic bonds, stocks, and the rupee. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley told investors on Monday the government would take necessary steps to ensure adequate liquidity to NBFCs after both the central bank and the market regulator said on Sunday they were closely monitoring developments and stood ready to act. The Reserve Bank of India will buy 7.8% of the 2020 bond, 8.2% of the 2022 bond, 7.72% of the 2025 bond, 6.79% of the 2027 bond, and 6.68% of the 2031 bond via an open market operation on September 27th, it said late on Monday. So moving on from that, we got other articles here. This one's from Crane's New York Business, and it says Blackstone said to be planning 7% yield for India's first REIT IPO. Portfolio will include about 33 million square feet. And as it kind of goes into, I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but it says Blackstone Group LP and its Indian partner set a tentative yield for their initial public offering of the country's first real estate investment trust, which could raise about 52.5 billion rupees, people with knowledge of the matter said. Blackstone and Embassy Group plan to approach the investors with an annual yield of around 6.5% to 7%, according to the people who ask not to be identified because the information is private. They are considering marketing the deal with a total return of about 14% to 16%, which takes into account factors like asset value appreciation and rental increases in addition to yield, the people said. Now, as you can see, we are going through a lot of articles here. Let's go on to the next one, and we'll try and dissect this as best as we can, because there's no doubt about it, we are facing a lot of issues in India. Anyway, as this article from Reuters says, India's bank non-performing loans rise to $150.2 billion at end March. And as this article kind of goes into, bad loans held by India's banks rose to 10.36 trillion rupees, $150.21 billion, at the end of March, the government said on Tuesday, with state-backed lenders accounting for more than 86% of the total non-performing loans. 21 banks, majority owned by the Indian government, had gross non-performing loans of 8.96 trillion rupees. Finance Minister Piyush Goyal told Parliament, citing central bank data for global operations of the lenders. In a separate response to a question from a lawmaker, Junior Finance Minister Shiv Pratap Shukla said the gross non-performing loan ratio of the state lenders had reached 14.6% in the 2017-18 financial year. So it's overwhelming. As you can see, now you understand what I meant at the beginning. We have a lot more stories coming at us from every angle. I got another one I'm going to go into in a minute. But first, John, can you fill us in on what on earth is actually happening right here? Can you kind of bring these together?
Yeah, well, the reason why we're talking about the non-performing loans and Blackstone is because, of course, Blackstone is coming into the market while, non-performing loans. So that's loans that's not being able to be getting revenue from, where they can't really pay their loan. It's about 14.6% of the total economy, like all loans, which is pretty scary. That should scare a lot of people. That's worse than Italy. It's actually, talk about Italy as the bad, cesspit of banksters.
Well, which it is as well.
Yeah, of course it is. But here, welcome to India, where, all the usual suspects are getting involved. You're looking at bad loans there. And then suddenly they come in, Blackstone Blackstone comes in and, are starting to take part here. You got to remember, Blackstone, of course, came in after the 2008 crisis and bought up a whole bunch of houses. They actually went in there and then suddenly sitting on a whole bunch of them, and now you're paying money to that hedge fund instead of actually invested. So it's pretty crazy how that works, how they're getting into the economy right at where it's turmoil, right at when there's panic in the economy. They're just coming into of course, loot and give their big investors a chance to get a piece of the pie before the whole thing collapses. And of course, making a lot of money on themselves. Even though that it will collapse, they will still have been making money on it. It's just an investment, so there's nothing for them to really lose other than their reputation, which they should have lost a long time ago. Yeah. Now we're gonna of course touch in on what the main problem in India is, and it's the government can't control their free market. They're having some issues there, Josh. They've been trying to ban the major rupees. I believe it was the 500 and 1,000 rupiah. They tried to ban that in the cashless move. Well, the problem is they're still using a ton of cash in India, and nobody's really going along with the train of letting the government control themselves. Now, I know that you're looking at something else there, Josh, so I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at a few examples of how the Indian rupee has been continuously falling. And we have to understand that, okay, so they gave a whole bunch of homeless people free bank accounts quite a few years ago in an attempt to basically control people. It was under this guise of we're helping the poor, but really in reality, they're tracking the poor, taking away their privacy rights, and being able to track everything to stop people from dodging being extorted by the state or something like that. And the fact is, the biggest issue they have is centralization, which is something we could say about every country in the world. However, India and China, especially the two most populated countries on the planet, are at the top of the chain when it comes to this. They are attempting to take over the world market when it comes to this massive centralized monetary system. They are wanting to go cashless. And with, you mentioned the demonetization of, currencies in India. I mentioned, the banking system and giving people free bank accounts. We've gone into a million different examples. It would take a million years to go over everything we have in the past. We've done dozens of videos on this subject. However, with that said, we have seen some of that. What I find really creepy is the Aadhaar system in India, which we first reported on a couple years ago, which is a system that has retina scans, etc. It's attempting to make this technocratic super state where people, if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's a bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks via digital transactions and legal tender laws, it's never your money, it's always a bank's, and you are essentially enslaved to the banking system and the government, of course. And with that said, I mean, they can track everything. They can bail in your bank, which is probably bankrupt because basically every single bank on the planet right now, the major banks are all bankrupt. But on top of that, they can get rid of depositor insurance. You are basically screwed. You can't do a run on the bank, and you're tracked everywhere, and you are followed everywhere. And they could implement what they're doing in China with a social credit system. And that's what brings me to the next level here, is what they are trying to script out and play out over a period of time. It's supposed to be an incremental frog boil, but it's not working that way because they're doing it really fast if you consider the magnitude, because they're desperate. They know that the systems, all these monetary systems around the world, are going to collapse, and they are trying to prepare themselves and pretend everything's all right, but at the same time prepare themselves for a greater system of enslavement, debt, servitude. And this article out of BBC News talks about this, which they don't mention what I'm talking about, but this completely plays into what I'm saying. Aadhaar, India top court upholds world's largest biometric scheme. India's Supreme Court has ruled that the country's controversial biometric identity scheme is constitutional and does not violate the right to privacy. However, the court limited the scope of the Aadhaar scheme, saying it could not be compulsory for bank accounts, mobile connections, or school administrations. The world's largest biometric ID database covers welfare and tax payments and access to social services. More than 1 billion Indians have already been enrolled. Many don't have other forms of identification. Only 65 million own a passport and 200 million have a driver's license. So India had one of the greatest free markets in the world. The merchants, the marketplaces outside of the government grid. And basically they've attempted to crack down on all that, call it the black market, quote unquote, to give it this dirty word as if, people are, killing people. I'm sure that it plays into
they're
it.
not
But
paying taxes, Josh. Come on.
Yeah, it's the idea that they're not being extorted as much from the government because they're being creative and trying to help their family instead of having half their money taken from them and being unable to feed their family. It's infuriating. So they mentioned that, okay, it's not compulsory at face value yet, but we have to remember how this has unrolled. Indians have historically loved gold and silver, loved physical money, loved the subjective value theory of scarcity, application, use, and demand, which is something that has been culturally important to India for centuries. And this idea that they're slowly getting rid of this system, it's amazing because it's like a test ground, guinea pigs using the people most likely to oppose a cash ban to support it, which is like you start there, then you unravel across the world. Of course, we have India attacking decentralized cryptocurrencies like China has while trying to unveil this massive cashless society, as there's a bit of competition between the countries to have that world reserve currency, utilizing the SDR at the IMF, etc. But I mean, this is absolutely insane because we have this system that's unrolling, and most people in India I talk to are not a fan of it. But that doesn't change the fact that they are slowly conforming to it under the guise of convenience, right? Because how often have you heard that word convenience tied with a very Orwellian system? And that's exactly what's going on here. And we have to be very careful and tread lightly because the centrally planned cashless society is on our doorstep. Better yet, it's in our house. It's not any longer on our doorstep. It's broken down the door with Amazon delivering packages inside of our house, and it's basically in our door. I mean, even in the United States, only 3% of the fiat currency is actually printed. The rest is digital. We're already going into this cashless society. Look at Sweden, 1% of transactions are done in cash. This is very, very dangerous considering the system, legal tender laws, centralization, fractional reserve lending, zero reserve policies, all these crazy things, the interest rates rising, inflation rising. We have to be ready for this. And before we get into that, John, what do you think?
Well, there's no surprise, Josh, that this is happening. You just got to pick up a book called The Curse of Cash. And there you actually get the outline of what is happening currently in the world.
Written by Kenneth Rogoff, the globalist pig.
Yeah, of course, he's part of the G30, which is not a part of any nations. If you think that's actually a private organization run by central banksters and the high up economists and so on, and the banksters are in there too with their head of their banks. Now, I just wanted to show you a quick chart here of gold and how gold is holding up, and this should make a little bit of interest to you because when you look at the amount of currency it takes to buy gold in the Indian rupee, it just shows you how terrible the inflation is. It's 86,774.30 rupee. That's a lot of rupee that it takes.
As we do this report.
Yeah, compared to the 1300-ish that it is now in US dollars. Now, of course, you can see that over time it's changing, but it's interesting about the time when they started to implement these cashless regimes. It went from about 71,000 was about the bottom, and then it's up at 85,000. So you saw the move to cashless. People are looking for it, and I know a lot of Indian people. I'm friends with some of them, and they tell me we have gold at home. Like we actually keep some gold at home in bars or whatever it is. And of course, when you get married in India, it's tons of jewelry that gets created in gold that you inherit and you hold as the woman in the family. So it's
if you have money, which is slowly teetering down over time as the government cracks down. That is.
Oh, of course, yeah, and then they of course remember when we were back in talking about this whole implementation of cashless. They were trying to go to churches and everywhere to try to get the gold out of the hands of the people and into the coffers of the government because they were afraid that they're going to have a massive run. And you've seen like the Indian rupee has lost a lot of value just over the last year. It's gone from about 64 to the US dollar to now 74-ish rupees. So it's lost a tremendous amount of value just within a year, and it's about to lose more because all these non-performing loans is just going to hurt the Indian population more, the private sector, and of course the government as well, because the government, a lot of them, around the world has been borrowing in US dollars, and then of course the US dollar became expensive, that's your quotations because they're all losing value, but it became expensive to the other ones. So now their debt is, the cost of the debt went severely up because their currency is less valuable than the US dollar. So it's a huge, pressure on the world economy. You're looking at South Africa, you're looking at Indonesia, Sri Lanka. We just did a video on Sri Lanka, their currency, Argentina, Venezuela. All these currencies around the world are faltering, and Turkey, of course, they're faltering because they're just the tremors of what to come into the real economy when people are starting to finally understand that this whole paper scheme is such a scam that has been brought upon us in collusion through the banksters and the central government.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so sickening to see people support Modi. It's always like the worst people that they support. Of course, all governments are criminal. That's all organized crime rackets. Anything the government does, the free market can do better. But with that said, I mean, it's amazing how people look at Modi like a god. And I mean, they come in sheep's clothing, folks. I mean, this is a many centuries old fact. We know this. We've thought about this. We've gone through this. But people keep repeating the same problems over and over again.
Well, look at the good guy. The supposed good guy, if you look at a lot of videos from the 2008 crash, Raghuram Rajan, he was at the IMF at the time. Of course, the IMF is a den of criminals as well, but he was there, warning Lawrence Summers, and Lawrence Summers called him a Luddite because he dared to, say that there was some serious problems in the debt markets in the United States with the housing there. And then, of course, he went to India, and then he just ran the bank into, trying to confiscate the gold and all this stuff. He's not there anymore, but he did a lot of damage there. So it's interesting how these good guys, come out and trying to save the economy, but they end up actually destroying it at the end because he went to the Royal Bank of India and then completely desolated, that place. So yeah, you try to, save a central bank in the economy. I'm going to go in there and change the central bank. No, it's a central bank. It's a criminal cartel running it, and it's always destroys the currency. Yeah. Don't try to fix something that's broken, guys.
Yeah, these piranhas always have the worst insults. Luddite, like really, they're just, oh my God, they're so, but I mean,
that's probably how I said it.
Oh God, I can't even stand them. Anyway, I think it's important to mention, as always, that all fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero. They always have, they always will, going back to 1024 AD in China. And we have to look at the fact that if they shove you down a bottomless pit of debt, you're forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing you into perfect servitude right where they want you. You're in servitude to the government, to the central banking system, to the bankrupt banks. And I think, finishing it off, John, we might as well just go into the solutions as always, because that's the most important part. So financial education, self-sustainability, food, water, shelter, self-defense, or not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, gold and silver as wealth insurance. Of course, we always have to say that this is our opinion, not investment advice. But it's not an investment to get into gold or silver anyway. It's historical advice. It's not even advice. We have to be careful with these stupid laws to not say it's advice because people are stupid. Anyway, and it's a wealth insurance. It's not an investment. So anyway, with that said, cryptocurrencies that are truly decentralized, I mean, most are terrible, but there are some that are amazing and will change the world forever. We must be decentralized. We must look to decentralized blockchain solutions, infrastructure. We can create alternatives for everything that coerces us and enslaves us today with this system. If we are smart, if we understand, if you're educated, you have the ability to have control over your money rather than the money masters have control over you, which is so important. And of course, responsibility, which is a hallmark of freedom itself. So be self-sustainable, decentralize everything, rule yourselves. And anyway, thanks for going into this with us, John. We will continuously talk about this because it's a never-ending process. Anyway, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized by YouTube as they bring in the ADL to flag all of our content as hate speech. Also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency, Steem that is. So don't forget to check us out there and find us at Anarchapulco 2019. I know it's early, but this is such an exciting event coming up with Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, Larkin Rose, Jeff Berwick, all the usual characters, and it's going to be amazing. So we hope to see you there. Make sure to check the link for Anarchapulco below and use promo code WHAM to save as much as 15% on your tickets. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.